Today with Lucy Aharish.
Good evening and welcome to the news today. Another deadly shooting in the U.S. This time at least 14 are killed and many others injured at a California center that provides services for disabled people. The two suspects later killed in a shootout with police have been named as Syed Farook and Tashfeen Malik. According to authorities, Farook is believed to have been radicalized and may have recently traveled to Saudi Arabia. The latest mass shooting tragedy is already reigniting heated debates over issues ranging from combating terrorism to gun control to immigration. I-24 News correspondent Uri Shapira has more.
What made a couple from Southern California go on a deadly shooting rampage? Less than a day after the horrific attack, which left at least 14 people dead, the picture is still not clear.
It is possible that this was terrorist-related, but we don't know. It's also possible that this was workplace-related.
The incident began around 11 a.m. local time in San Bernardino when Syed Farook and Tashfeen Malik opened fire at the Inland Regional Center inside the convention center where Farook worked as an inspector. Apparently, Farook attended the party early that day, and according to eyewitnesses, he seemed angry and stormed out. Later, he returned with Malik and started shooting. At 15:20, police tracked the SUV belonging to the couple, started chasing it, and exchanged shots with them. The two suspects were killed. Another suspect was detained, but police say he wasn't among the gunmen at the center.
We confirm that we believe that those were explosive devices. I think about an hour or two ago, the bomb squad finally disposed of those particular items.
The profile of the suspects cannot really shed light on their motives. 27-year-old Farook was born in the U.S. He identified himself in an online dating website as a religious Muslim with Eastern and Western mixed family values. According to his co-workers, he had traveled to Saudi Arabia. According to authorities, the weapon used by the shooters was purchased inside the U.S.
It's almost like there's no more a safe haven.
According to shooting tracker website, a mass shooting with at least 4 casualties occurs in the U.S. nearly every day. The question of whether the California shooting was an act of terror or not remains open. But one thing is clear: while America mourns its latest victims, it is once again caught between the need to protect itself and the need to uphold the Second Amendment to the Constitution on the right to bear arms.
And with me here in the studio is Amir Oren, government and defense analyst for Arts Daily newspaper. Good evening.
Evening, Lucy.
And David Ifyun, editor-in-chief at the El Minar. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining me. Before I will start discussing this with you, I'm joined now by ABC News reporter Lauren Lister, who is in San Bernardino. Lauren, what can you tell us about the atmosphere there today where you are, and how are the people dealing with this?
Good evening, Lucy. This was a drama that played out in real time for the people living in this community and all over the country, as it was cataloged and followed on national television all day long, beginning with that mass shooting scene as we saw helicopter footage of the victims coming out, getting loaded onto buses around the perimeter, one family member after another, relaying the text messages and the phone calls they were getting from loved ones inside, some that were okay, texting that they were hunkered down in offices, some calling saying that they were injured but doing fine. Family members, plenty of them around that perimeter, getting emotional and wondering what was going on, as this was an active shooter scene that very much was developing as we watched. Then it continued. It continued with that pursuit of the SUV in a San Bernardino neighborhood as neighbors and people living there, residents, didn't know what was going on. And a pursuit followed in that shootout right there on that San Bernardino neighborhood, just a few miles from where the shooting occurred, certainly shaking up this community and, you could argue, the nation with this mass shooting of this scale. Back to you, Lucy.
Lauren, thank you very much for this, and we're continuing this discussion here. Amir, I will start with you. You know, President Barack Obama, when he spoke today, he didn't want to be very, let's say, specific, and he, maybe because of the terror attacks in Paris, maybe because he doesn't want to terrorize the people in the United States, that actually the threats of Daesh just 2 weeks ago are going to become a reality. And yet, this is some kind of a common thing in the United States when we're seeing people who are getting in and just shooting and killing masses and masses of people.
Definitely. It's a routine occurrence, unfortunately. But when you have circumstantial evidence regarding the profile of the couple, this is the radical Islam version of Bonnie and Clyde. You can have many examples of non-terrorist incidents in which people got guns and ammunition and went around killing dozens of people. But this time around, it does seem that there is some basis, even though one should not rush to judgment, and the San Bernardino police chief told his questioners to go ask the FBI, because this is a federal offense and they have access to intelligence. But nevertheless, right now, one should assume that this was a terror act, because in the couple's house, the police found so much ammunition, so many pipe bombs, so much evidence of planning, that perhaps doing it in the person's workplace was incidental. Perhaps he didn't intend to do it to his co-workers, but the plan was to go somewhere else. But definitely there was some planning for a terror act and for a gun battle with police. And the police chief said that so much ammunition was expended by both the suspects and the police that it did look like a battle.
So let's talk a little bit about the debate that was reignited again, which is the gun control in the United States, and how easy it is to purchase a gun, how easy it is to just get into a supermarket, get a gun, and start killing people. And I ask myself, after all these incidents, and after all these attacks, and after all these accidents, let's say, the United States still doesn't understand that it needs to have some kind of a gun control laws that will stop these events from happening?
So here's the thing. I think, first of all, the very fact that the discussion of gun control has been brought up so soon belies an undercurrent here of what the Obama administration's agenda is in how they've reacted to this particular tragedy. According to the issues that they are trying to push, it is in their interest to underplay the possibility of terrorism and to overplay the possibility of gun or workplace violence. And you see what efforts the administration is going to make that the case in terms of what it's saying. When you have an attack here in Israel, you know within an hour the police will tell you what the motive was. This nonsense of we're investigating, we'll see, we'll find out. As you said, the circumstantial evidence seems to be so broad that I think they should come out and be straightforward about what is at play here.
Yeah, just I will say that the White House spokesman says that people should resist urge to jump to conclusion in California shooting investigation. So they're asking for now not to.
So look, you see this throughout the Obama administration's presidency. He is trying. He wants there not to be a problem of Islamist terrorism. He doesn't refer to Islamist terrorism. He's wiped it out of official documentation. In his mind, it does not exist. It's not referred to as such. He wants gun control. So he's trying to use this already to push his agenda.
So let's join to this conversation Nida Khan, a journalist in New York. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining me.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Nida, did you just hear our discussion here? A little bit, at least
yes,
the last...
Yes, I caught the tail end of it. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. At least the last sentences. Do you think that the Obama administration is doing its best to not bring on the table the Islamist radicalization that we are seeing or experiencing around the world?
I think the president, actually, who just spoke a short time ago, gave a very measured response in terms of saying that this could have very well been a terrorist-related attack, or it could have been workplace related, but we don't know just as of yet. And the FBI just concluded a press conference along with the chief of police in San Bernardino, reiterating the same thing, that it would be premature and irresponsible to come out and speculate and say this was definitively terrorist related. Now, could it very well have been? Absolutely. The investigation is going through right now, and we'll find out once this stuff comes out. But I think the jumping on the bandwagon immediately once it's a person who has a Muslim name, or as a lot of media outlets here went with yesterday, saying that it has a foreign-sounding name and automatically classifying it as terrorism, is very dangerous, because it feeds into that narrative that only Muslims are the ones who commit acts of terrorism, and not when it's, let's say, a white male shooter.
Yeah, Nita, you know, we're talking, and we brought up again the issue of Islamophobia in Europe after the Paris shooting attacks. Muslims in the United States do feel that after September 11, or especially after all the attacks, all the terror attacks that we're seeing that are being perpetrated by ISIS?
Absolutely. You see, and not only after September 11th, even now, because there's so much ratcheting up of this anti-Muslim rhetoric after the Paris attacks, even here in the U.S., you have people like Donald Trump, Ben Carson, just spewing all this kinds of anti-Muslim hysteria and phobia. And you've seen a rise in attacks against Muslims. Even on Thanksgiving Day, there was a cab driver who was shot after a passenger asked him questions about whether or not he was Muslim, where he was from, just, you know, and mosques being attacked around the country, and Qurans being thrown, and people just kind of watching their back. And then every time you have an incident like this, unfortunately, all Muslims are collectively required to denounce it and take some sort of, you know, make some sort of response because of it. Whereas when you have, like, the Planned Parenthood shooting that happened last week in Colorado, and it was a white male Christian who could have very well been motivated by his views on abortion, you don't see white males being required to denounce it, or every single Christian being required to denounce it. So it's very hypocritical, and it just creates a very toxic and disturbing environment.
Yeah, but you know what I'm asking, and let me be the devil advocate here, is that, you know, some people will say, you know, look what is happening around the world, and maybe being politically correct here, this is what is making these events or these things to happen. Maybe we should call it as it is and stop looking for other explanations to this.
I think it absolutely is terrorism, and we should, in fact, I would even call this an act of terrorism, but I also call what the Planned Parenthood shooter, Deer, his last name is Deer, what he did, also an act of terrorism. And I think that's where the problem lies, is that we just selectively use it. When violence is perpetrated by other people or other backgrounds, we don't use the same verbiage, and therein lies the problem. Are there Muslims that commit acts of terrorism? Absolutely. Are there Christians who commit acts of terrorism? Absolutely. Are there Jewish people who commit acts of terrorism? Absolutely. But it lies in the verbiage and when things are juxtaposed with terrorism, and who's deemed a terrorist and who's not. And I think that's fundamentally where the problem comes into.
Yes, of course, Nida Khan, thank you very much for this conversation with us. You wanted to react.
Yes, you can see the political divide in the United States regarding this issue, because the two of the most powerful lobbies in Washington are the National Rifle Association and the Jewish pro-Israeli lobby. And the Republican Party is traditionally pro-NRA, the National Rifle Association, and pro-AIPAC or other groups such as the National Republican Coalition, which several of the contenders for the Republican nomination have addressed today, Senator Marco Rubio, Senator Ted Cruz, and others, and they have aligned themselves with Israel against Islam, and they tried to make the connection between the San Bernardino massacre and Islam worldwide and come out for Israel.
You know, this maybe is a perfect time when we are we're seeing let's say, the race for the presidential campaign and for the presidency. Maybe this comes at a good time for everyone to start putting themselves like a little bit further than somebody else.
Well, I think the first thing that's important to understand that the right to bear arms in the United States is constitutionally protected according to the Second Amendment. So it's not just a Republican issue. It's true that there has been some movement to try and police gun laws on the Democratic side. But there hasn't really been much movement or support for the president's agenda to put laws on it, even within the Democratic Party. And a big reason for that is obviously because of the Constitution. And I think it's especially interesting that really the U.S. has a tremendous amount that it can learn from Israel on this issue, because guns, you walk in the streets here, guns are very widespread. And Israel, I think, has a system for making sure that guns to secure the public, which was the intention of the Second Amendment, are available, but guns in the hands of the wrong people are not as available. And I think it's something that the U.S. should study and look at the way that Israel does it and see if they can mirror it.
But this could refer to pistols, to handguns. What these murderers had were the civilian version, the commercial version of M16s, of military issued rifles. And machine guns were outlawed, concealed weapons were outlawed. So even though, yes, the Second Amendment does allow people to bear arms, which is, of course, a relic of the revolution against the British rulers from London. Nevertheless, it doesn't make sense in this day and age to keep it the way it is.
Yes, and we still, unfortunately, I didn't ask you yet what is, I don't have enough time, but what will happen if this will be a terrorist attack and it will be connected to ISIS, and what will happen then, and how would the United States will react then? But this apparently may be the questions that we will ask in the upcoming days. Gentlemen, thank you very much for this.